Former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte is heading to the Netherlands to face charges of crimes against humanity. A plane carrying the leader, known for his brutal crackdown on illegal drugs, left Manila on its way to The Hague on Tuesday. President Ferdinand Marcos said that his predecessor is to be turned over to the International Criminal Court, which has issued a warrant for his arrest. It's a surprising development in a country whose people both applauded and decried the violence Duterte encouraged.
Detained in a comfortable chair, facing a very uncomfortable future.
What is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
The answer, according to the International Criminal Court warrant, as dozens of police guarded his airport holding room, quote, the crime against humanity of murder.
I was brought here not of my own volition. It's somebody else's.
Families of those killed brought out images of their loved ones to offer a thanksgiving for Duterte's arrest. Rights groups estimate his crackdown killed tens of thousands of mostly poor men, often without proof they were linked to drugs. The arrest warrant says Duterte bore criminal responsibility for the murders of at least 43 people. Filipino police heard tough talk from Duterte throughout his political career. My order to them was that if they are holding a gun, kill them immediately so there will be one less criminal. Activists say that Duterte's tough talk frequently turned to extrajudicial action. CCTV caught these cops bundling away a high school-age suspect, scared family members in pursuit. The boy's body was found later after an alleged gunfight. As protests against the bloody crackdown grew, Duterte insisted his actions saved lives and families and prevented the Philippines from turning into what he called a narco-politic state. After the arrest in Manila, his supporters also hit the streets, protesting the arrest of their former president. Duterte remains popular among those who backed his quick-fix solutions to crime.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Vicente Rafael. He's a professor of history and Southeast Asian studies at the University of Washington. He's also the author of the book, The Sovereign Trickster, Death and Laughter in the Age of Duterte. Professor, it's good to have you with us. What did you think when you heard the news that Duterte has been arrested? Were you surprised?
I was both surprised and delighted at the news, because I have long thought that he deserves to be held accountable for all the crimes that he's committed throughout his regime.
His daughter is the current vice president of the Philippines. She is saying that the arrest has no legal basis. The president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., says everything has been done by the book. Will there be a political backlash in Manila, do you think?
There probably will be. How extensive it will be, I'm not sure. First of all, it's one of the reasons for the surprise is the fact that the current president, Bongbong Marcos, had been allied with Duterte and had said in the past that he wouldn't let the ICC sort of interfere in a situation in the Philippines. But it's quite surprising, given the recent falling out of the two families, that he had allowed in this case, the Interpol to come and capture Duterte and take him away. And so, this is a kind of very savvy political calculation, I think, on the part of the current president to make sure that he faces no competition in the coming election. So, yeah, that was part of the surprise, yeah.
Professor, in your book, you talk about Duterte as a sovereign, the ruler who decides who lives and who dies, and you also call him a trickster, a vulgar joker who brushes aside any criticism. Talk to us about Duterte's style of governance and how the crimes and violence that took place, how that was allowed to happen.
Yeah, well, as a kind of sovereign, of course, the classic definition of the sovereign is that the sovereign is the one who decides who lives and who shall die. And this was certainly the case with Duterte. He had no truck for any kind of legal procedures, any kind of judicial procedures. He simply gave his okay to the police to kill those that they suspected were, drug dealers or criminals or whatever, giving free hand, as it were, to his security forces. And I think this is one reason why the killings were so widespread. Lists were compiled, people were systematically killed, and so forth. And as a trickster figure, I think this is one of the reasons I think why he was so popular, in part because he knew how to speak a certain kind of popular language. He knew how to joke with his constituency, and this endeared him to some of his followers as much as it turned his opponents off because of his vulgarity and because of his misogyny. So, yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you, before we run out of time, Professor, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, will we see Duterte stand trial in The Hague, considering the fact that he is 80 years old?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. He's on his way to The Hague. He's going to face trial. And my understanding is it takes at least 2 years before any kind of trial actually takes place. Will he survive that long? I don't know. So, there are a lot of questions up in the air at this point.
Okay, Professor Vicente Rafael, we certainly appreciate your time and your valuable analysis with this developing story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gregory Poling from the think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Greg, it's good to have you on the program. The Philippines is not a member of the ICC anymore. Duterte, in case our viewers don't remember, Duterte withdrew the Philippines from the ICC back in 2019. And so it's not obligated under international law to detain someone who has a warrant against their name. So why did the Philippine authorities, why did they do this?
Well, the Philippine Supreme Court had already ruled that because Duterte didn't withdraw the country from the ICC until 2019, the Philippines was still bound by any investigation that started before then, including this one against Duterte himself. The government has also said that as a member of Interpol, they were obligated to comply with the red notice for his arrest. But, of course, at the end of the day, this came down to a political decision that the current government agreed to follow through with that.
Human rights groups, they've held this as a critical step for accountability in the Philippines. Are they right?
I think it's an important first step. And if Duterte, who's on a plane to The Hague, if he's actually convicted, this would be the first time the ICC convicts a former head of state, which would be significant, I think, for the court's legitimacy, and it would be a significant step for accountability for the drug war in the Philippines.
Flesh out a little bit, if you would, what you said earlier about this being a political decision in the Philippines.
So President Duterte's daughter, Sara Duterte, is the vice president and was in coalition with the government of the current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. As a result, as recently as last spring, Marcos was insisting that he would not comply with any order by the ICC for Duterte's arrest. But we've seen a real falling out between those two. So the Marcos half and the Duterte half of the government are now kind of really at each other's throats heading into midterm elections this year. I think it's no coincidence that the political fracture within the government happens to coincide with Marcos's willingness now to comply with the ICC arrest warrant.
It sounds like this could be a powder keg in terms of domestic politics, maybe domestic peace for the Philippines.
So it could be. The other thing going on here is that Sara Duterte, Rodrigo's daughter and the current vice president, has been impeached for misusing funds and threatening to kill or have assassinated the current president. So there's a lot of political drama going on here as well. And the Senate, which will have to try her for removal from office, will do so in July after midterm elections. So there's a real race by the Duterte camp to try to get as many of their people elected as they can to head off the potential for her to be convicted.
Duterte's trip to Hong Kong over the weekend, that sparked speculation that he was trying to evade arrest. Now, Duterte's daughter, as you were mentioning, denied that he was trying to seek asylum in China. So why would Beijing grant him that anyway?
Well, Beijing has a record of holding on to figures that they might find politically useful. For instance, the mastermind of the 1MDB, massive multi-billion-dollar scandal in Malaysia, is still in China. You can imagine how having a Rodrigo Duterte would be politically advantageous to China, especially if they think that his daughter has a shot at the presidency in 2028. But all of that speculation aside, obviously Duterte didn't want or didn't request asylum and chose to come back and take his chances at home.
And Duterte, a former strongman, he's now on his way to The Hague. Do you think there is a lesson to be learned that goes beyond Philippine politics, that a body like the ICC can still force a strong man, a former leader or a current leader, to face justice?
I think that there is an important testament to the ICC's legitimacy here. If the ICC, particularly given its efforts now to hold Netanyahu and Israel to account, other failures to bring heads of state to actually the dock in The Hague, there's been, I think, questions about the ICC's real role and viability. If it is successful in convicting Duterte with the willing acquiescence of the current government of the Philippines, I think that does say something about the ICC's viability as a route for justice.
And do you think this is exactly what the ICC needed at the right time, considering the verbal bashing that it's been taking, particularly from U.S. President Donald Trump?
Look, I'm not sure if this solves the ICC's problems, its image problems or its legitimacy problems, but I know it doesn't hurt. And I think the ICC is an institution that probably needs some wins right now, and this could be a big one.
And let me just answer before we run out of time. The Philippines and the United States are allies, and I'm just wondering, the fact that Duterte had taken the country out of the ICC, now he's been arrested, is there going to be, do you think, any type of repercussions or consequences for relations with the U.S. because of this?
I doubt it. The Philippines has been receiving nothing positive signals so far from the Trump administration. Alongside Taiwan, they're one of only 2 places that have gotten waivers on their foreign military assistance so far because of the larger freeze in U.S. overseas assistance. The Philippine government got the first phone calls in Southeast Asia from both Secretary of State Rubio and Secretary of Defense Hague. So I don't see any evidence yet, anyway, that the Trump administration is looking at the Philippines as anything but a valued partner.
Okay. Gregory Poling from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We appreciate your time and your valuable analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.